Judge, don't go far. Catherine Herridge has more information now from Washington, working the phones down there. Catherine, what do you have?
All right, Bill, I was on Capitol Hill back in September of 2017 when Michael Cohen testified behind closed doors to the Senate Intelligence Committee. And this is one of these situations where I always like to go back to the documents. Just before that closed door testimony, Cohen issued what was a two-page statement. And I just want to draw your attention to one specific section which deals with this Trump project in Moscow. And it reads in part, and this is from Cohen, "I assume we will discuss the rejected proposal to build a Trump property in Moscow that was terminated in January of 2016, which occurred before the Iowa caucus and months before the very first primary. This was solely a real estate deal and nothing more," Cohen wrote. "I was doing my job. I would ask that the two-page statement about the Moscow proposal that I sent to the committee in August be incorporated into and attached to this transcript." So this is key here. We've got at least two sets of records that relate to this Trump real estate proposal in Moscow. One is this written statement that was provided to the media by Michael Cohen that references a two-page summary of the proposal that was sent to the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. I'm not aware that that document has ever been made public, but I'm going to go back and check. But what you have here would at least be sort of the basis or the predicate timeline, specifics about the proposal, why it was withdrawn, and how it related to the election cycle. And this could be the foundation for the making false statements about the project to Congress, so the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. So that's where I am right now, Bill. I'm going back through the records, which I think is a smart thing to do at this point, given what the allegations are about the proposal.
Thank you, Catherine. Stand by there. Back to the judge here in New York. Judge, you said there's a roadmap now being laid out on behalf of Bob Mueller's team. What's the roadmap?
Well, the roadmap appears to run through Jerry Corsi and perhaps through Roger Stone and through the Julian Assange and perhaps through the president of Ecuador and perhaps through Paul Manafort in an effort to, this is Bob Mueller's theory now, not mine, show a circuitous route of communication between Russian hackers getting into the DNC and the Hillary campaign computers and delivering that information to the public.
To be clear now, of course, he says he's not signing anything.
Correct.
He will not admit to something that did not happen.
So when I say
with
roadmap,
regard to the Assange story, that's been pulled back.
When I say roadmap, I mean Bob Mueller's theory. Whether he can prove this theory or not, he obviously believed that Jerry Corsi was an essential cog in that theory, and Corsi has decided not to accept the guilty plea. We know this because he revealed publicly the documents that Mueller wanted him to swear to, and in those documents was the roadmap. We're going to see another roadmap in February. Bob Mueller says Paul Manafort lied. Paul Manafort's lawyers say he did not. He can't be sentenced until the judge decides whether or not he lied. How will the judge decide that? By taking testimony from FBI agents who will tell the court in a public courtroom what they asked him, what answers he gave, and what they had from other sources to contradict his answers. That, too, will reveal the Mueller roadmap.
All right, Judge. So just basically wrapping what we are knowing at this hour as we await the president possibly making comments on this, Michael Cohen pleading guilty to lying to Congress about this effort to build the Moscow tower. You know, you have to step back and look at this broadly, as we know that Mitch McConnell just basically put a stop to any sort of bill that would be put forward to protect Robert Mueller from the president being able to fire the special counsel. I just wonder, I mean, not that we can anticipate the president's comments if he does make any in a few moments here, but what the strategy would be on the part of the White House to react to this news this morning.
The strategy on the White House has been to deploy a very, very brilliant attorney who's a household name, Rudy Giuliani, not only as a lawyer, but as a PR person for the president, to create the impression among the public that the indictment or the impeachment of Donald Trump is utterly unacceptable. And I suggest to you that Rudy has done a very effective job at that. So look at more of that to come. Think of the personal sting here. Michael Cohen was not only the president's personal lawyer, but his confidant. Michael Cohen once said he would take a bullet for the president. president. He has now pleaded guilty twice, both times involving the president and both times promised to help people who are trying to bring the president down. This must sting the president terribly.
Although Rudy Giuliani and the president have a pretty good idea which direction Bob Mueller's going, because they've been consulting with Kevin.
Yes, there is. I don't think there's anything inappropriate with that, but Mueller's people obviously knew, because they've been through this before with other defendants, that Manafort's lawyers would be speaking to the president.
Thank you, buddy. Stand by, okay? Thank you, Judge.
If you could stand by for a couple more minutes for this. Rick Leventhal has something new outside of the courthouse for us. Rick, what are you learning now?
Well, Sandra, I just spoke at length with our producer who was in the courtroom, and I have now been fully briefed on what was said and done inside that courthouse this morning during that half-hour hearing. As you know, Michael Cohen has pled guilty to a felony count of making a false statement back on August 28th to the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence regarding that Moscow project. That guilty admission includes the timing, the conversations with people, and any discussions about an attempt to travel to Russia. Now, this is separate from that agreement with the Southern District that we've discussed. They did reference the Southern District agreement in this guilty plea, but they're so far not tied together. Now, here are the details of what happened in court at 9:34 this morning. Michael Cohen pled guilty and asked to stand to speak in that courtroom. The judge said, "No, please stay seated because the acoustics are bad in the courtroom." So Cohen remained seated and then spoke for 3 minutes. And he told the court and the judge that prior to the 2016 election, he was the counselor and advisor to the Trump organization. But by 2016 was no longer continuing to work for the president in that capacity, who was then referred to as Individual One during his testimony. He said, though, Cohen did, that he followed the political messaging. He was aware of the president's messaging, that the president was not tied to Russia, that the attacks on him were politically motivated, and all the interactions were terminated by the Iowa caucuses. That was the messaging that Cohen said he was aware of. Then Cohen said in 2017, he was scheduled to meet with the Senate committee. He submitted a written statement to that committee, which included the Moscow project. And Cohen told that committee that the description was false, that he asserted that all efforts had ceased on the Moscow project by January 2016, when actually Cohen says they continued until June of that year. So another 6 months of discussions that Cohen lied about. He also then said there were more extensive communications than he revealed to the Senate committee. He asserted that he never discussed travel with the president or Individual One, but he says he actually did discuss travel, although he never actually did travel with the president to Moscow. And he says, Michael Cohen did, at the end of his 3-minute statement, he says, "I made the statement to the Senate to keep up with the political messaging and out of loyalty to the president." We can also tell you that Cohen faces up to 5 years in prison on this latest count and up to a $250,000 fine, but that is all weeks away.
All right, Rick Leventhal outside the courthouse where Michael Cohen just made a surprise appearance this morning. Rick, thank you.
Very interesting, Judge. You get a chance here now to stand up and talk for 3 minutes in court, and likely revealing a lot that has not been known so far.
And I have never seen or heard of a guilty plea, and of course I wasn't in the courtroom, I'm here with you guys, where the defendant wants to tell the court more than is necessary. So the great reporting that we just got from our colleague Rick Leventhal is almost literally the tip of an iceberg. Where is the rest of that iceberg? In Bob Mueller's office, because I assure you, knowing the way that the feds operate, that Michael Cohen has been extensively debriefed before they brought him into a courtroom this morning to say anything. And they've probably already verified everything that he's given them. And this has gone on below the radar screen while we're all trying to figure out who's going to win the midterms.
I can tell you, as of 2 weeks ago, Michael Cohen was set to be sentenced on the 12th of December.
Well,
so
right now, of course,
something changed over the past 2 to 3 weeks.
Correct. Right now, of course, he's facing another sentencing. We don't know when that's going to happen. In the best of all worlds for him, it will be one sentencing at one time before one judge. But they're going to hold off on that until they see where the information he gave them takes them.
Okay, Judge, thank you. Doug McKelway's in the North Lawn. Down to the White House we move now. Doug, what's happening there?
Well, Bill, I just heard the whir of helicopter blades on the South Lawn just moments ago, and also reporters and camera people have been summoned to the Palm Room doors, which is a signal that the departure for Andrews Air Force Base and to Buenos Aires for the G20 summit is now imminent. I would be really surprised if the president does not come to reporters there who are gathered to speak about this Cohen plea deal, this Cohen guilty plea, because he has been very, very adamant and very aggressive in attacking the Mueller prosecution day in and day out, especially this week as it appears that things are now coming to a head. Let me just explain to you real quickly how this is going to work on the South Lawn, because reporters there and camera people have no access, no ability to feed live as the president walks out. As soon as he finishes his remarks, if he makes remarks to reporters, he will walk onto Marine One, and at that point, the reporters and the camera people are released to head back into the briefing room, at which point they will feed the tape if the president makes any comments. He has been very aggressive about the Mueller probe earlier this morning before this guilty plea by Cohen. Here's what he tweeted earlier this morning. When will this illegal Joseph McCarthy-style witch hunt, one that has shattered so many innocent lives, ever end, or will it just go on forever after wasting more than $40 million? Is that possible? It has proven only one thing: no collusion with Russia so ridiculous. And then earlier this morning, he said, do you ever see an investigation more in search of a crime? At the same time, Mueller and the angry Democrats aren't even looking at the atrocious and perhaps subversive crimes that were committed by crooked Hillary Clinton and the Democrats. A total disgrace! Exclamation. Keep in mind that he has also referred to Mr. Cohen in the past as a rat, so one would think that the president is very eager to speak about Mr. Cohen, but it remains to be seen whether he will do so. All of this occurring as he prepares to leave for the G20 summit. It is a jam-packed schedule for the president there. He's going to be on the ground in Buenos Aires for only 48 hours, yet he has scheduled 8 high-level meetings, none more important than the one with President Xi. As the two countries engage in this trade war, the president has long maintained that the United States has the ability to survive a trade war better than China does. He also has meetings planned with President Erdogan amidst the controversy associated with the murder of Mr. Khashoggi. And he also has another meeting potentially planned with Mr. Putin. That perhaps pertains more to this present issue than any of the other meetings. Just yesterday, Russia indicated that that meeting is on, but earlier this week, the president said he might be willing to cancel it. So that's where things stand right now. Perhaps we'll hear about all of this if the president speaks to the media moments from now. Back to you.
All right, Doug McKelway at the White House for us. We will likely see the president a short time from now.
Senator Warner now, the Democrat.
Commentary that this individual made before our committee, we've kept that confidential, but obviously Mr. Cohen was one of the witnesses that we've always wanted to have come back, and that need goes up.
Did you refer his testimony to the special counsel?
Again, it's already in the public domain that referrals have been made from our committee to the special prosecutor, but we're not going to talk about any individuals.
Did you still think, does this make Michael Cohen a less reliable witness for Bob Mueller, that he admitted that he lied to your committee?
Well, there seems to be a trend here amongst so many of the president's closest allies that they don't tell the truth, although you've also got a White House that seems on a daily basis not to have its facts straight.
Would this extend your investigation at all?
Well, we still have a number of witnesses to see, and we have a number of witnesses that are some of the key names, key individuals, that the chairman and I are working through on how we get them to come back. Because just as our investigation has to finish, and we owe the American public as much of the truth as we've been able to discover, it also is just one more reinforcing indication why the Mueller investigation has to be allowed to continue unimpeded. And I just don't believe that the current acting Attorney General, Mr. Whitaker, has the temperament and also the bias to oversee that investigation. And one of the things we don't know, for example, is we've not been able to hear back from the Justice Department whether Whitaker has ever received an ethics review of whether he should recuse himself from that investigation.
But does this new information learned from Michael Cohen, does that factor into the people that you will call, and will you call some people again knowing this?
Well, again, I'm not going to get into the witnesses of who we've called, who we continue to intend to call, but as we continue to see this rollout of close Trump allies plead guilty, almost always due to their trying to hide their ties with Russia and Russians, and the Russians attempt to infiltrate the Trump campaign, I think there's more story to be told.
If Mueller knows or was able to prove that Cohen lied to your committee, what does that tell you about how much more he knows or where that investigation is right now?
Again, I think it seems like it was ages ago, but it was only in August when Mr. Cohen decided to work with the special prosecutor. My understanding, some level of working together. And I think we've all felt that Michael Cohen has a lot of information that I hope he shares with the special prosecutor, and one of the reasons why we think he needs to come back and share it more with the Senate Intelligence Committee.
In his hearing just now, Cohen said that he made these false statements to be consistent with Individual One's messaging, Individual One presumably being the president. What does this tell you about the president?
Well, I've not read. I just got the headlines from Rachel about what he said. But let's face it, you've got all these close associates of the president, one after another, pleading guilty, often pleading guilty about their ties to Russia and Russians. And what are they covering up for? And we also have a White House that still seems just obsessed about this investigation. If anything the president has said is true, that there's no there, why are all his closest associates being found guilty of lying about their ties to Russia?
And the president has said that he's...
It was in the context of Paul Manafort yesterday. It was in the context of Paul Manafort yesterday, but the president is still talking about leaving pardons on the table. He hasn't ruled a pardon out for Paul Manafort. He hasn't been asked yet, to my knowledge, about Cohen. But how much does that concern you, that the issue of pardons is just being openly discussed at the White House, potentially?
That would be a complete abuse of power. The power of the pardon is not ever been used to protect a president and his family. And again, we've seen from this White House again and again disregard for rule of law. When we see that disregard for rule of law, and if you were to go out and try to pardon some of these individuals that might potentially implicate him or his family, again, Congress would have to act.
Thank you all. Thank you,
Thanks, Senator.
Did you all refer this?
All right, you've been hearing from Senator Mark Warner there, reacting to the latest news on Michael Cohen. As we await the departure of the president at the White House any moment now, we're starting to get the court documents and exactly what happened in that courtroom this morning, the action on the part of Michael Cohen.
So the question then becomes, at what point was this Russia deal talked about? At what point did the Russia deal conversation end? What was Michael Cohen suggesting by writing the political line, which was some of the commentary he delivered in court? And perhaps, Judge, this is, this is a man, President Trump at the time, a candidate Trump, who was a businessman, who did not know whether or not he would win the White House in January of 2016. And perhaps this was part of his day-to-day business, trying to forecast what he would do, whether he wins or not. It could be as simple as that.
I agree with you. I think you are suggesting, and the documents that I have read reinforce your suggestion, Bill, that there may very well be an explanation for his lies that has nothing to do with the Mueller investigation.
Or anything nefarious.
Correct. It may very well have been that the Moscow hotel deal collapsed. He didn't want candidate Donald Trump to have to endure that on the campaign trail, and for those reasons he told these lies. Now, look, that doesn't justify the lying. The lying to Congress under oath is still a crime, and that's the crime for which he's pleaded guilty.
We're just trying to understand it.
But there may be a non-Russian conspiracy, Bob Mueller et al. Basis for the lies that he told.
Thank you, sir. Stand by.
All right, a lot more coming up as we await the president. Judge standing by, Catherine Herridge standing by with an update there as Michael Cohen pleads guilty to a charge in the Mueller investigation. We are awaiting the president. He is about to depart the White House. He could make comments on this. We await that. We'll be right back.
You've got somebody lying to Congress. They're admitting that they're lying to Congress now. Is there anything?
Cohen, you mean?
Yeah, Cohen.
Yeah, I just heard that now. Well, he should be prosecuted to the extent of the law.
That was Paul Ryan just a short time ago, learning of the news that Michael Cohen, the president's former lawyer, has pled guilty in a New York courtroom this morning to lying to Congress about the work that he did on a Trump real estate deal in Russia. So that was fresh reaction there as we continue to learn more.
So what do we know and where do we go? Michael Cohen apparently lied to the Senate Select Committee about business dealings in Russia. To what extent, we do not know, but apparently there was talk about a Moscow project in January 2016 and beyond. Apparently this was talked about also with individual one, according to the documents from court, which refers to then candidate Trump, then private citizen Trump in the court papers, and did not recall any Russian government response to the Moscow project. So all this is what we're going through at the moment. The president right now is talking with reporters on the south lawn of the White House as he gets ready to board Marine One. We will, what we call, take turnaround in a moment here. Sometimes it goes a couple of minutes. Sometimes it goes 18, 20 minutes.
Sometimes it goes a while. You never know, but he is talking to reporters.
Yeah, be patient on that, and we're certain that he has a statement about this, so we will bring that to you as soon as we get it from the White House.
Meanwhile, Catherine Herridge has been working the phones to try to find out more. What are you learning, Catherine?
Well, Sandra, really from the outset, we've been focused on Michael Cohen's September 2017 closed-door testimony to the Senate Intelligence Committee. At that time, he issued a public statement, and buried in the public statement, there is a reference to a 2-page summary about this Moscow real estate proposal. I have now obtained a draft of that 2-page summary that Michael Cohen provided to the Senate Intelligence Committee. And based on what we heard this morning, really is at the heart of this admission that he lied to Senate investigators about the proposal. I want to just read you a couple of key sections of this draft document that relates to the project. One appears to be a conflict over what he told the Senate committee about the timing of the project and what, in fact, was the period it was under discussion by the Trump Organization. Cohen writes the proposal was under consideration at the Trump Organization from September 2015 until the end of January 2016. By the end of January 2016, I determined the proposal was not feasible for a variety of business reasons and should not be pursued further. Based on what I think Rick Leventhal reported earlier, Cohen has now admitted that that discussion really continued until about June or the summer of 2016. It then goes on to mention an individual who I think may be pivotal in how this proceeds, and that's Felix Sater. Felix Sater was born in Russia. He's a naturalized U.S. citizen, as I recall, and a real estate developer. And Mr. Cohen writes, the Trump Organization did not employ Mr. Sater in connection with the Trump Tower Moscow proposal, nor did the Trump Organization compensate Mr. Sater for his involvement in the proposal. However, Mr. Sater acted as a deal broker and would have been compensated by the license if the proposal had been successful. It also goes on to discuss whether Donald Trump, then candidate Trump, would have traveled to Moscow as part of this real estate proposal. And Cohen continues, despite overtures by Mr. Sater, I never considered asking Mr. Trump to travel to Russia in connection with this proposal. I told Mr. Sater that Mr. Trump would not travel to Russia unless there was a definitive agreement in place. Those close to the president's legal team are emphasizing this morning, looking at this Moscow proposal, that it never went forward. And they say that for them is really the bottom line, and they don't recall the president being asked specific written questions about it by the Mueller probe.
All right, Catherine, thank you. Just so you know, the president is taking questions on this topic on the south lawn of the White House, so don't go anywhere. We're going to take a quick break here, and when he concludes and when we get the recording for that, the playback, we'll bring it to you.
And former Deputy National Security Advisor Michael Anton is our headliner this morning, formerly of the Trump administration. He is going to join us to react live to this news this morning. We await the president. We will hopefully have that soon for you. We'll be right back.
Back to the breaking news now. In a moment, we're going to hear from the president, and he will react to the headline of the hour. Michael Cohen in a courtroom in Lower Manhattan last hour. Apparently, he lied to the Special Select Committee in the U.S. Senate, and we're gauging reaction as to what the extent of this lie ultimately means for the Mueller probe at all.
All right, and Michael Cohen has already left that courthouse after that surprise appearance this morning, and now reaction continues to pour in. We are waiting reaction now from the president, the White House. He is departing on his way to the G20 summit. Ahead of that, we've got Michael Anton, former National Security Council spokesman for President Trump and now a lecturer and research fellow at Hillsdale College. Michael, great to have you on this morning, and obviously you've been following the breaking news along with us. What are your thoughts as we await to hear the words of the president?
Well, it looks like another process crime, 18 months into this investigation, which I think we all thought was set up to discover if there was some collusion on behalf of the Trump campaign or others with Russia or a foreign power to influence the 2016 election. And we have as yet seen no indictments on that original charge. And I personally haven't even seen any evidence on that original charge. So, you know, how long is this going to take? I mean, this is an extraordinarily well-funded, well-staffed operation. If in 18 months it can't turn up anything relevant to its original mandate, how long does it really need to go on? I mean, that's the question that I ask myself, and I'm sure many people ask themselves.
The mandate is, did Russia mess with our election and change any votes?
Not so much that. We know that Russia tried to mess with our election. I don't have any doubt about that. I personally, having looked at the reports, think that those Russian efforts were kind of laughable. They weren't very well funded. They were pretty ham-fisted. I doubt they changed any votes. But that's what Russia does. That's what foreign powers do. They try to meddle in other countries' processes. The real question on the American side is, did anybody in the American side collude with the Russians, try to get help with the Russians? That's a serious question. The president has said all along, no, nobody in his campaign did. He didn't. I think he's right about that. I certainly believe him. But also, you know, if there were some collusion, again, 18 months, I don't know, do they have something like 30 prosecutors and a huge budget? Why haven't we seen anything? If there's something to this, they should have been able to show us something by now, it seems to me.
Michael, let me get your response to this, because we have seen various reaction coming in this morning. Paul Ryan just commented on it. He was on a stage, a Washington Post discussion, and his response was he should be held responsible to the fullest extent of the law. A short time before that, we heard from the Democrat Senator Mark Warner. His point, there seems to be a trend here among so many of the president's closest allies that they don't tell the truth. That was his takeaway and his immediate reaction upon learning the news. How do you respond to that?
Well, look, if somebody doesn't tell the truth to a federal law enforcement official, of course that's a crime. They should be held accountable for that crime. There are normal channels, though, through which to investigate those kinds of issues. Do we need to set up a particular special prosecutor that's so well funded with so many prosecutors with an unlimited mandate and no timetable to find these kinds of crimes? It seems to me that that is out of proportion to the offense. If there is some, you know, grand underlying crime potentially that threatens our democracy, that's one thing. That's what they're supposed to be looking into. That's why I thought that this special prosecutor was set up. That doesn't seem to be what they're focusing on. Certainly not from the indictments that we've seen so far. They haven't found anything along those lines.
Michael, the president is done talking with reporters on the South Lawn, so we're going to play that for our viewers in a moment here as soon as it becomes available. Apparently called Michael Cohen a weak person, according to the AP, and claims that he's lying to get a reduced sentence. Your larger point, Michael, is that if there was collusion, where's the evidence? And in the meantime, what the media tends to do is they tend to hyperventilate over these headlines. If you pause for a moment and peel back the curtain, we're still trying to figure out what this means. If you're candidate Trump as a private citizen working out of New York City on Fifth Avenue, not knowing whether or not you're going to win the White House, and you're asking yourself, what will you do after this campaign? He was probably still working on business deals. And a lot of this, frankly, we don't have a lot of insight in. And I imagine Michael Cohen has a good idea. But whether it was a fib or a lie, or whether he was trying to circumvent what senators were trying to do, or whether or not he was trying to protect the president with the message that he had for the White House, or his ambitions to win the White House anyway, is not entirely clear.
I don't think we know necessarily from this plea deal. We've also seen some plea deals happen in the past throughout this investigation that become questioned or challenged down the line. It's clear that the special counsel can bring extraordinary pressure on people who maybe start out as witnesses and then become suspects or targets. And for them, you know, in facing that pressure, they're going to seek the deal that they think is the best for them and their families. Again, if somebody actually does lie to a federal law enforcement agent, that's a crime. It should be prosecuted. I just question why we need essentially an entirely new entity when we already have a Justice Department and FBI. We already have U.S. attorneys. We have a whole system set up to investigate these kinds of things, prosecute them if necessary. Why do we need this massive, highly staffed, highly funded apparatus to look at, you know, what are process crimes that look very small in comparison to the grave allegation that a campaign colluded with a foreign power to win an election? That's a serious allegation.
In the meantime, you're about to take off for Argentina and meet with these world leaders, Russia, China, et al., more than that. I mean, there are big targets at these meetings here. What is your sense about how he goes into this when foreign leaders watch these headlines and watch the news? How do you manage it?
I don't think it changes how the president deals with these meetings at all. I wouldn't be surprised if he were frustrated at the timing of these announcements. Did it have to come the very morning that he's leaving for a summit like this? You know, I don't see the necessary reason for that, and he probably doesn't either. But he won't let it rattle him in terms of the way that he approaches his meetings. He's going to go into each meeting with an agenda already worked out, and he's going to stick to that agenda. And that agenda will be very much substance-driven about the interests of the United States and what he's trying to get for our country from those world leaders.
Well, Michael, to add to the discussion that we're having here, we're getting some of what the president said ahead of actually getting the tape to play back for everybody. He said on multiple occasions Michael Cohen is lying. And on what you and Bill were just exchanging there, he said, when I run for president, doesn't mean I'm not allowed to do business. I often joke that I was the only person that campaigned and ran a business. I was focused on running for president. It was an option I decided not to do. And he goes on to talk about that deal in Moscow. I was focused on running for president. There would be nothing wrong if I did do it. A lot more that the president said there that we will get back to.
It's very public. I wasn't trying to hide anything. So we're going to hear that from him in a moment. Get a quick break in here. Our A-team's lined up as well. Michael Anton, terrific having you back today, okay? Thank you. Hope you come back very soon.
Michael.
Quick commercial timeout. You hear from the president in a matter of moments right here on America's Newsroom.
The president just spoke as he is departing for the G20 summit, and he did indeed answer questions on Michael Cohen taking that new plea deal in the Mueller probe.
Part about what you're about to hear is I was focused on running for president. There was nothing wrong if I did do it. Here we go.
So Michael Cohen has made many statements to the House, as I understand it, and the Senate. He put out a statement talking about a project which was essentially, I guess, more or less of an option that we were looking at in Moscow. Everybody knew about it. It was written about in newspapers. It was a well-known project. It was during the early part of 16, and I guess even before that. It lasted a short period of time. I didn't do the project. I decided not to do the project, so I didn't do it. So we're not talking about doing a project. We're talking about not doing a project. Michael Cohen, what he's doing is he was convicted, I guess, you'll have to put it into legal terms, but he was convicted with a fairly long-term sentence on things totally unrelated to the Trump organization, having to do with mortgages and having to do with cheating the IRS, perhaps, a lot of different things. I don't know exactly, but he was convicted of various things unrelated to us. He was given a fairly long jail sentence. And he's a weak person, and by being weak, unlike other people that you watch, he's a weak person, and what he's trying to do is get a reduced sentence. So he's lying about a project that everybody knew about. I mean, we were very open with it. We were thinking about building a building. I guess we had in a form, it was an option. I don't know what you'd call it. I decided ultimately not to do it. There would have been nothing wrong if I did do it. If I did do it, there would have been nothing wrong. That was my business. So he's lying very simply to get a reduced sentence, okay?
Well, that's not supposed to happen. Hang with it. The audio clearly is in and out, but we'll stick with it as much as we can.
That doesn't mean I'm not allowed to do business. I was doing a lot of different things when I was running. After I won, Obviously, I don't do business from January 20th, but more importantly, which is a following year. But I ran a business. In fact, I often joke about the fact that I was the only person that campaigned and simultaneously ran a business. But that was a project that we didn't do. I didn't do. That was a project that wasn't done for a lot of reasons. Number one is that I was really, not that I had to do it, but I was focused on running for president. I wanted that to be my primary focus, not running or building a building. Well, this was a deal that didn't happen. That was no deal. I mean, if you look, this was an option. I guess, I don't know if I want to be very specific. So, but to my way of thinking, it was an option that I decided not to do. So we didn't. So if you look, we really didn't have, excuse me. So, excuse me. This was an option in a form, but here's very simple. We had a position to possibly do a deal to build a building of some kind in Moscow. I decided not to do it. The primary reason, there could have been other reasons, but the primary reason, it was very simple. I was focused on running for president. There would be nothing wrong if I did do it. I was running my business while I was campaigning. There was a good chance that I wouldn't have won, in which case I would have gone back into the business. And why should I lose lots of opportunities? So here's the story. Go back and look at the paper that Michael Cohen wrote before he testified in the House and/or Senate. It talked about his position. What he's trying to do, because he's a weak person and not a very smart person, what he's trying to do is end, and it's very simple. He's got himself a big prison sentence, and he's trying to get a much lesser prison sentence by making up a story. Now, here's the thing. Even if he was right, it doesn't matter, because I was allowed to do whatever I wanted during the campaign. I was running my business, a lot of different things during the campaign. So very simply, Michael Cohen is lying, and he's trying to get a reduced sentence for things that have nothing to do with me. Now, let me go a step further. I think you should go back to, I think it was January. It was just reported very well by Catherine Herridge, who's a terrific reporter on Fox. She talks about a letter that he signed. I don't even remember it. And it specifically talks about this deal. This deal was a very public deal. Everybody knows about this deal. I wasn't trying to hide anything. Okay. I cannot understand you.
Supporting groups like Hamas and Hezbollah in Syria and Palestine. So when you see Putin, what are you going to tell him about these activities?
Well, we're going to talk about it, but we have a lot of things to talk about, Jeff.
You're going into a summit currently. What is your sense about a trade deal with China? What do you expect the state of it to see?
I think we're very close to doing something with China, but I don't know that I want to do it, because what we have right now is billions and billions of dollars coming into the United States in the form of tariffs or taxes. So I really don't know, but I will tell you that I think China wants to make a deal. I'm open to making a deal, but frankly, I like the deal we have right now.
Are you going to meet with and if so, what are you going to do?
I probably will be meeting with President Putin. We haven't terminated that meeting. I was thinking about it, but we haven't. They'd like to have it. I think it's a very good time to have the meeting. I'm getting a full report on the plane as to what happened with respect to that, and that will determine what I'm going to be doing. Well, I have a couple of reports. We're getting a finalized report. Are you talking about on the Russian situation with the ship and the Ukraine? Yeah. We're getting a finalized report. I'm going to have it on the plane sometime today.
Why aren't you meeting with the Crown Prince?
It just wasn't set up. It only wasn't set up. I mean, I would have met with him, but we didn't set that one up. I'm meeting with President Xi, which is a very important meeting, having to do with trade. And as you know, I'm making about 3 or 4 meetings. We just didn't have time.
If Cohen is, Mr. President, are you going to be raising the case that Americans were held in China with President Xi?
I'm going to bring it up, yes. I don't hear you. You got to talk. You see that? You have a helicopter. No, the question was asked yesterday about pardons with respect to Paul Manafort, who, it's very sad what's happened to Paul, the way he's being treated. I've never seen anybody treated so poorly. But the question was asked to me by the New York Post, and I said, no, I have not offered any pardons. And I think they asked, or whatever, would you? I said, I'm not taking anything off the table. That was done as a question from the New York Post.
Did you tell Michael Cohen what to tell
If Cohen is such a bum, why did you hire him, have him on your payroll for 12 years, and have him do so much of your dirty work?
Because a long time ago, he did me a favor. A long time ago, he did me a favor. No, not at all. Not at all. I'm not worried at all about him. You just take a look at his written document. Go back, take a look at what he wrote in, I think, January. He has a written statement, and that's the fact. Yeah.
There is a campaign in the city of Strasbourg who wants to push people to vote for the European election, saying, friends, we don't want the European Union to be like Trump's America. What do you want to tell them? What do you want?
I don't know what, you know, you can't with a helicopter.
Yeah,
Sorry.
what do you want to tell
A possible shutdown if we don't get the wall money. A very possible. We're in negotiation. If we don't get border security, possible shutdown.
There's a lot of news in that back and forth just now. President Putin will meet with President Trump on Saturday morning in Argentina. He'll meet with President Xi on Saturday night in Argentina. With regard to the breaking news now, Michael Cohen is lying. Sanders said that repeatedly. Quote, we had a position to possibly do a deal in Moscow. I decided not to do it. I was focused on running for president. There would be nothing wrong if I did do it. His position a moment ago.
President Trump on multiple occasions calling his ex-lawyer a weak person, not a smart person, claiming he's lying to get a reduced sentence. He used that word several times, and then, as you said, went on to make a lot of news about the fact that he will be having a meeting with President Putin. Let's bring in our A-team to react to all of this. James Freeman, Guy Benson, Marie Harf has been standing by as down to Buenos Aires. Marie, to you first.
Yeah, Sandra, I think both what you just heard from President Trump, with all of that explaining, all of the explanations, even if it had happened, it would have been okay, and with all of the tweets in the past few days, this is a president who, to me, seems like he's nervous about what Bob Mueller might be doing. And we heard Judge Napolitano a few minutes ago say this is the tip of the iceberg. Mueller knows what the rest of the iceberg looks like. And to a lot of people, they don't know what this means exactly with what Michael Cohen pled guilty to today, but all of the lying that we've seen from Team Trump just in the past week makes it appear to a lot of people like there's something to hide, like they have something to cover up. If they did nothing wrong, why all of the lying, including lying related directly to Russia, directly related to things the Trump organization did during the 2016
Got to get the others in here.
campaign.
Guy, some of the president's final words were not worried at all about him referring to Cohen.
Maybe, maybe not. It seems like the White House clearly isn't pleased that a longtime confidant and ally of the president is out there making another deal with federal prosecutors and at least painting things in an unfavorable light for the president. I think Bill's question earlier is the key one. What does this actually mean? Everyone, oh my gosh, he's pled guilty to this charge with Mueller. Well, we don't know. There's a whole deck of cards that Bob Mueller has, and this is one of those cards that we're seeing. We don't know what the context is. I would remind people that Michael Cohen pled guilty on 8 federal charges in August. So it's not like there's been no leverage for Mueller and his team previously with Michael Cohen. So, again, not a good day for the White House when this is happening, but I don't think any of us can say with any certainty how bad of a day it is necessarily for them. And one other point, Sandra, that I picked up very clearly multiple times, the president referring to Michael Cohen as weak and stupid. And at one point he said, unlike other people. And it sort of seemed like he could have added a parenthetical, Paul Manafort, who is clearly angling, I think, for a pardon. And he's doing so by saying, I will not lie for these prosecutors. I will not lie for Mueller.
Let's not read between the lines too much yet. James Freeman, go. Your reaction.
Yeah, I think in this city and around the world, investors are probably going to be most interested in that comment suggesting that maybe we're a little closer to a trade deal with China than previously thought. So that's going to probably be on the minds of a lot of people in the markets today as they think about what that means and what might happen at the dinner with Xi Jinping. As far as Michael Cohen, obviously the president made his normal vigorous defense. I think related to those earlier plea agreements, the president is correct that the leverage came from unrelated tax fraud by Michael Cohen and also false statements to a bank when he was getting a loan that had nothing to do with President Trump. So a reason to sit back and maybe wait for more info before jumping to a conclusion.
Thank you, sir. James Freeman, Guy Benson, Maria Harf. Thanks, guys, for hanging out.
Sure thing.
As far as that